All right, welcome to pro football. First 50 years where we take the past, now we bring it back to life. Now I'm strictly talking the first 50 years here, 1920 to 1970. Especially if you're going to go back in time and check out a game from like the 1920s or the 30s. I mean, sure, yeah, you can go online, find a box score, who won, who lost, who scored a touchdown, how far a field goal was that somebody kicked. You might find the attendance, where the game was played at. You might find starting lineups for each team. Exactly what happened during the game. Well, thanks to old newspaper articles, we get to take a little bit of a deeper dive into each and every game during the first 50 years of professional football. Now, little news flash here for you. Ain't no fancy videos here, nothing like that. All there is you and me for the next 30 to 60 minutes. So if that's all right with you, let's get it on in today's game. Opening day of the 1959 season for these two teams. Saturday game. Oh. The Cleveland Browns at the Pittsburgh Steelers at Forbes Field, September 26th, 1959. Both teams would have successful seasons, I guess. Browns would be tied for second place. They would wind up tied 7-5 for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now for the Browns, the 7-5 season, would be a little on the disappointing side, although it was a winning season. For the Philadelphia Eagles, it was a very successful season. They won 2 games in 1958. And you go from winning 2 games in 58 to winning 7 in 1959. That was a very successful season. For the Steelers, it was, somewhat of a successful season as well. They wound up in third place. They were 6-5-1. So both teams had winning records. But both teams would get there in different ways. The Browns would kind of fall apart at the end. The Steelers kind of fell apart in the beginning, and neither one could, rebound it was very difficult because the Giants only lost 2 games, right? And for the Steelers, they pretty much took themselves out of any kind of contention early on. And then the Browns, they lost 5 games. They fell apart at the end. I said the Giants just kept winning and winning, and it's just wasn't meant to be. This would be a tough game. Of course, Cleveland obviously was going to be a good team, but with the Steelers, especially with Bobby Lane as your quarterback, you always had the Steelers obviously always had a tough defense, right? And then with Bobby Lane, the guy was just a winner. So not that the Steelers won all the time, because it took them till 1972 to even win a playoff game, but they were always, quite capable of beating any team at any time. They always had a propensity, shall we say, of beating the New York Giants. They would beat the Giants this season. They even though the Giants had winning records quite often, and maybe won the division and maybe went to some championship, the Steelers always seem to have always find a way of beating the Giants. And I said that the Giants only lost 2 regular season games. One of them went to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So let's pull up the. Let's start off with the Cleveland Browns. Pull up the 1959 season. Neither team had very good preseasons. Now, once again, as I always say, it goes 2 ways, right? What were they? The Browns here. They won their final preseason game. So these first 6 games. So they were 2-4. So actually they were 1-4. And then they beat the Bears, who actually didn't lose a preseason game until this final one. But, and I said, there's always 2 ways of looking at the preseason games. It's a game. So, hey, why are you playing the game? Hey, can we win? Right? Try to win. But, I mean, obviously, it's to try out new players and all that and everything. So, it's not always your starters. A lot of times, as I said, especially back here, they're trying to test out their rookies and all. So, if you lose these games, it's only preseason. But once After the Bear game, you'll notice now, I was spoiler alert, the Steelers would win this game 17-7. But after this, obviously, you see they beat the Browns. They would beat the Cardinals. Then they would lose a tough one to the Giants, and then they win 5 games in a row. So actually, with the Browns, after 8 weeks of the season, they were 6-2. So were the Giants. So they were tied atop the Eastern Division with records of 6-2 with 4 games left to go. Anybody's race, and they even had one more game to play against each other. The second to last game of the season. You can see here where the Giants blew them out of Yankee Stadium. My goodness, this might have been the worst beating that Paul Brown ever took as a coach in the NFL with the Browns. I didn't look. I didn't go over all his yearly records and all, and I didn't look either when he was coaching the Cincinnati Bengals either. But they got blown out here. But they had 2 tough 1-point losses here. One, once again, was to the Steelers. They lost a 1-point game to the 49ers, and they got blown out here. And then they would rebound, and they would beat the Eagles to finish the season with a record of 7-5. And by beating the Eagles would have a record of 7-5. But you can just see right here, they lost these three games in a row, and they still had a chance here. They had to beat the Giants, they had to beat the Eagles, and they had to hope that after beating the Giants, that the Giants would lose their final game of the season, which that didn't happen either. So, but once again, it was 7-5. Somewhat of a successful season for the Browns because, with Paul Brown, Jim Brown, they had a plethora of Hall of Famers on their team. 3 games out of first place, 7-5. Had to be somewhat of a disappointing season for the Cleveland Browns. Now, on the other hand, for the Pittsburgh Steelers, once again, they did not have a fantastic preseason either, as we'll see right here. Zoom. What were they? Are they 2-4 as well? Yeah, 2-4. Actually, one of the weird. It just the way it was. They would wind up playing. Look, yeah, it's weird stuff. They played the Cardinals 2 times in preseason. They, as well, a lot of teams did a lot of neutral site games. They played in Austin, Texas. They played in Houston, Texas. They played Miami, Florida. They played in St. Louis, Missouri, where the Cardinals would play in 1960. Because after 59, they would move to St. Louis and become the St. Louis Cardinals in 1960. They played in Bloomington, Minnesota, where eventually in Metropolitan Stadium, eventually in 1961, where the Vikings would start playing. So, but this don't happen nowadays, where you play the same team 2 times in preseason, and then once, of course, it happened all the time back then. They actually played teams in their own division, right? I'm a Giant fan. Tough to say, but I'm a Giant fan. The Giants don't play the Eagles in preseason. They don't play the Cowboys. The Cowboys don't play the Eagles in preseason. But back then, it was only 2 divisions, so you had to play teams in your own division. But you'll notice here what the Steelers did. Right, once the regular season started, they won here, but then they lost 2. They won, and then they lost. So you can see we got 6 games into the season, they were 2-4. Basically, almost took themselves out of any contention. When they obviously when they were 2-4, that was halfway through the season. They didn't know that the Giants were going to win with only 2 losses, but back then, the 12-game schedule. You halfway through the season, you got 4 losses, all right? There's a real good chance you're not going to be able to win the division, even if you win out. And in the Western Division, the Colts, they wouldn't have caught the Colts either because the Colts were 9-3. So, but you'll notice here, the final 6 games, they won 4, they lost 1, they lost a tough one on the road to the Bears, and that's no disappointment there because the Bears were a very good team. The Bears were 8-4. So they lost 27-21 to a very good Bear team. So maybe this 10-10 tie to the Lions was a little bit of embarrassing because the Lions were not a very good team in 1959. But you'll see, right? I mean, they beat the Giants. Giants had 2 losses. That was one of them. They beat the Browns again. They killed the Eagles, who were 7-5, and they won the final game of the season against the Cardinals. So, the final 6 games of the season, they were 4-1-1. And they did the same exact thing in 1958. I believe it was the final 7 games of the season. They didn't lose a game. So, I bet couple of years here, toward the end of the season, they were on fire. It's just that they took themselves out of contention. The same thing they did in 1958. Early on, bumbled out of the starting gates, and they pretty much took them out of contention. But you said, they were a good team, very, very good team, and 6-5-1. Of course, Coach Buddy Parker was a very good head coach, but 6-5-1, it was a winning season. I mean, they did that a lot. I mean, they would have maybe not the greatest season, but then they had winning season. They just could never seem to line their ducks up all in a row, I guess, shall you say, where they have a good season and it's good enough where they can win the title, I mean, the division, and go to a championship. They never were able to quite put everything together until 1972. The 1947, they wound up tied with the Eagles for the division, and they had a playoff game to see who would go to the championship game, and the Eagles would wind up beating them in that one, 1947. But you can. One of the Steelers had a winning record, you can never count them out of any game. And the Browns were a very good football team, coached by a Hall of Fame coach, obviously Jim Brown. I don't need to talk to you about how good that guy was. And they won this game, 17-7. As we see here, this game was played at Forbes Field. So let's take a little look. See here, what does Wikipedia got to say about Forbes Field? I can't say it was the home a lot of super spectacular football play, but I mean, a lot of great players played there. Forbes Field had its moments, baseball moments, because in 1960, obviously the Pittsburgh Pirates would beat the New York Yankees. Bill Mazeroski would hit that home run to left field to win Game 7 for the Pirates. So, but all right, Wikipedia. Here we go. Forbes Field. Here we go. All right. Odd, just an odd looking kind of shaped stadium. Whoops. Oh, I'm all the way down to the bottom. My bad. Some of it, it's weird. I'll show you some pictures, and it's like, wow, that's a nice sized park. Wow, I can see the fans. I can see that. I can see a nice amount of people there. And then there's other shots of Forbes Field. It's like, where the people at? Forbes Field is a baseball park in Oakland neighborhood of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, from 1909 to 1970. It was the third home of the Pittsburgh Pirates, a Major League Baseball team, obviously, and the first home of the Pittsburgh Steelers. From 1909 to 1924, the stadium also served as the home football field for the University of the Pitt Panthers. Stadium sat on Forbes Avenue, named for British General John Forbes, who fought in the French and Indian War and named the city in 1758. $1 million. A $1 million project was launched by the Pittsburgh Pirates owner Barney Dreyfuss to replace his franchise's second home, Exposition Park. The stadium was made of concrete and steel, the first such stadium in the National League and the third in Major League Baseball, in a bid to be more durable than wooden ballparks. Yeah, wooden ballparks, they ain't lasting very long. And they are, not to mention, they are wooden ballparks are a fire hazard. Let's see. The Pirates opened Forbes Field June 30th, 1909 against the Cubs. And they played their final game against the Cubs on June 28th, 1970. The field featured a large playing surface with the batting cage placed in the deepest part of center field during games. I mean, this just goes to show you how it was back in the day. Seating was altered multiple times throughout the stadium's life. At times, fans were actually permitted to sit on the grass in the outfield during overflow crowds. The Pirates won 3 World Series at Forbes Field. Let's see. Some remnants of the ballpark still stand, surrounded by the campus of the University of Pittsburgh. 1903, Pittsburgh Pirates owner Barney Dreyfuss began to look for a ground to build a larger capacity replacement for the team's then current home, Exposition Park. Dreyfuss purchased 7 acres of land near Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh, adjacent to Schenley Park, with assistance from his friend, industrialist Andrew Carnegie, who quite possibly at that point in time might have been the richest man in the world. The low price of the land was selected so Dreyfuss could spend more on the stadium itself. And Andrew Carnegie was the steel magnate, right, at the time. Let's see. Dreyfuss signed a contract to make the ballpark of a design that would harmonize with the other structures of Schenley Park district. Dreyfuss announced that unlike established wooden ballparks such as the Polo Grounds, he would build a 3-tiered stadium out of steel and concrete to increase longevity. The first of its kind in the nation. Wow. Initial work on the land began on January 1st, 1909, but ground was not officially broken until March 1st. The Nicola Building Company built the stadium in 122 days. Very impressive. I mean, 4 months? Wow. And play began less than 4 months after ground was broken on June 30th. The scoreboard was operated by hand. But the ballpark featured multiple innovations such as ramps and elevators to assist fan movement throughout the park. A room for the umpires, for crying out loud, and a visiting team clubhouse similar to the Pirates. Nice. Let's see. Opening day, the first game was played at Forbes Field on June 30th, 1909. You got a picture over here, Forbes Field and Belfield Bridge, I'm going to say, 1909. Wow, look at that. 1909. Look at it in the background there. Very impressive. Very impressive. Here we go. Here's Forbes Field, the outfield wall and flagpole in its original location in Oakland. How nice, huh? Stadium was widely considered the best in the league at the time. Dreyfuss hated cheap home runs and vowed he'd have none in his park, which led him to design a large playing field for Forbes Field. The original distances, the outfield fences, left, center, and right field were 360 feet. That's a shot. 462 feet to center field. Holy cow. That's a shot. And 376 feet. Wow. That's unbelievable. If you hear anything snoring, that's my dog Randy. He's laying at my feet. So keep it down. He's trying to sleep. Let's see. Of course, throughout the years, 1921, the seating capacity was increased. 1925, the seating capacity received a bigger bump. So it had been changed, several times and all. Let's see. Although it's very interesting too. Although Forbes Field developed a reputation as a pitcher-friendly ballpark, there was never a no-hitter thrown in the park in more than 4,700 games. Wow, that is crazy. Here's another right here. I mean, it's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful ballpark. But you can just see right here, like there's a street here and there's a street here, and I have no idea when the streets were built and all of that. But a lot of times, sometimes the stadiums are built, at the mercy of the streets that it's built around or built inside of and all that and everything. But you'll just see here, I'll show you pictures. It's like, there's certain shots you'll see, you look, there's like, where are the people at? But you see right here, I mean, it's like, double decked all the way. Yeah, so you can see where certainly a lot of people, but you can also see where if this was double decked out here, or if this was double decked all the way down here, and that, it could certainly going to help more people. Here we go. Recreated entrance, including the ticket window located near the remaining outfield wall. Very nice. Here's the home plate at Forbes Field, located in Pasvar Hall at the University of Pittsburgh. Very, very nice. Memorials, right? The left field wall was moved to PNC Park in 2009. How awesome is that? Forbes Field Monument in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Absolutely fantastic. All right, so his baseball was played there, but you can just see it was the capacity. Yeah, especially what we're talking. 30-something thousand. A lot of stadiums were much bigger. There we go, Forbes Field in its early years. I mean, you can see. I mean, look at this. I mean, this is a field out here. My goodness, a lot of room out here. We're at football. There we go. University of Pittsburgh's football team moved to Exposition Park upon its opening in 1909 and played there until 1924, when it moved into a larger Pitt Stadium only a few blocks away. Let's see. In their first game at Forbes Field on October 16, 1909, the Pitt Panthers defeated Bucknell University 18-6. Let's see. 1926, Carnegie Tech Tartans football team pulled off one of the greatest upsets in sports history by defeating the 8-0 Notre Dame Fighting Irish, shutting them out 19-0. Yeah. All right, here we go. Pittsburgh native Art Rooney founded the NFL team under the name the Pittsburgh Pirates in 1933. He found it for $2,500. That's what you could buy a team for back then. The franchise first game against the Giants was held on September 20, 1933. Giants won 23-2 in front of 25,000 people. 1940, the Pirates were renamed the Steelers and otherwise struggled during much of their 3 decades of tenancy at Forbes Field. The club achieved its first winning record in 1942, which was its 10th season in existence. The University of Pittsburgh acquisition of Forbes Field in 1958 gave the Steelers some options, and they began transferring some of their home games to the much larger Pitt Stadium that year. The Steelers played their final game at Forbes Field on December 1st, 1963. The franchise moved to Pitt Stadium exclusively the following season, where they played from 1964 to 1969, 1970. Three River Stadium opened up. And if you ever want to see their first ever game at Three River Stadium, it's on YouTube. The Steelers back then, I remember, clear as day, growing up in Long Island, being a Giant fan, every year the Giants played the Steelers every year. They don't do that anymore. But the Giants always used to play the Steelers in the 70s and even into the 80s, I believe. They always played, obviously, the Jets. They always played the same. They played 6 games, but one was always against the Steelers, one was always against the Jets. But the first game ever at Three River Stadium was an exhibition. It was Monday Night Football of all that. Well, it was I think it was Monday Night Football's first ever broadcast. It was the exhibition game between the Steelers and the Giants, which also happened to be Terry Bradshaw's first ever game. The Steelers would win that one. What was it, like 21-6, I think it was. Fran Tarkenton didn't play for the Giants. I think he was injured. So it wasn't much of a game. But if you ever want to see Three River Stadium first ever football game, it was an exhibition. It was the Steelers took on the Giants in the Monday Night Football crowd with Keith Jackson, I believe it was. You can catch it on YouTube. And here we go here. Now you can just see. I mean, this just goes to show you. I mean, obviously, because there was no TV back then and all that. So if the people wanted to see the Pitt Panthers, you couldn't put on ESPN, right? Pittsburgh Pitt Panthers game against Washington Jefferson College in 1915. Now you could just like the people, it's crazy. But also, I mean, Pittsburgh was very good back then. But don't be forgotten, Washington Jefferson. I know who they were very good as well too. For a period of time, they were coached by Bob Folwell, who was the head coach of the New York Giants in 1925. He was their first ever head coach. He only coached them for 1 year, 1925. But he was he was a very successful coach in college. He coached a few different colleges during his time in college. But Washington and Jefferson was one of his stops, and he had them a few years, 3-4 years or so. I can't remember exactly, but he had them. I don't want to say a powerhouse, but they had some very successful seasons under him. As you see, boxing and other events were there, all kinds of stuff. I mean, until 1970. So a lot of things went on there, a lot of things, and I said maybe there weren't the greatest games of all time were played there or whatever, but, between like college, professional football, baseball, and all of that, it's like the people who, the athletes and all that played in that stadium, just rather mind-boggling. So let's get some pictures here of Forbes. I show you, I'm talking about. I mean, some of it's like, you'd be like, where are the people at? There we are. All right, now, this is a beautiful picture right here. Opening day right here. What was it? 1949 right here. September 25th. So this is September 26th, opening day, 1959. Well, this is September 25th, 1949. Just 20,957 people on hand to see the game against the Giants, Steelers and the Giants. So you got the Steelers over here, and you got the Giants over here, right in the red. But you can just see both teams were on the same side. You got the Steelers over here, you got the Giants over here. But I mean, you look from the one side here, you're like, you're looking at over here. It's like, where are the people at? Right? There's the scoreboard. That's a Bill Mazeroski hit his home run over Game 7 of 1960 World Series. But I mean, I'm going to say this one's not touched up. I mean, I am a moron, so don't get me wrong. But I mean, obviously some of those other older pictures get colorized by people and stuff like that. I mean, this one looks true to form here. It's just a beautiful, beautiful picture. Now this one here, I guess after it's was not being played in anymore, right? I guess you got, I don't know, somebody standing here, and if you got some weeds being overgrown here and all and everything. Just a shame. Here's another beautiful picture right here. This one's like a postcard here, but I mean, this could be against the Giants as well too, with the red jerseys there. But you see the infield here, right? And you see, right? I mean, you look at one shot, and it's like, where are the people, right? Then you look at the other shot, they hit a pro football game. It's like, oh, they're all the people. Here's right. There's another. Yeah. Oh, it's very small. Here we go. This is going to be big. Ah, thank you. It's going to be big. Look at that. Once again, you can see, obviously, whatever. Well, there's got to be a baseball game here, right? I mean, you can just see all the people, right? There's people down here. So you can see where it certainly would hold a lot of people. But, now when he bought the land, right? I mean, was it in I don't know. Did he just maybe run out of money where he couldn't afford to put, the grandstands or whatever, double decking all the way around the whole stadium? Here we go. Here's a shot down here. Right, the scoreboard. I mean, how cool is that? Right? Everything was all turned by hand and all of that, like the kind of the Fenway Park kind of thing. Now this could be a. This is not the actual shot. This is the photo of the home run. in the 1960 World Series. I'm not exactly sure. Let's see what else we got here. We got here. There we go. Steelers versus the Redskins at Forbes Field in the early 50s. Once again, I mean, look, it's like, it's kind of like, where is everybody? Yeah, what is this, a high school ballpark they're playing in? But let's see what else we got here. Well, no, this wasn't. This was not in Forbes Field. Go to the football field in Pittsburgh. I don't know what this has got to do with this. This was. I think this was a Pitt Stadium. I think it was. This happened in 1964. This is when Wyatt Tittle got injured. So he took that shot there, and then that's him laying in the end zone. Let's see anything else here. Here we go. Is it? Right. I mean, look at that. I mean, man, look at those uniforms. The color. Wow. Right. 49ers versus the Steelers. There you go. So we got what? Who's winning? Is that 17 right here? And you got the 49ers. So it's, I guess is maybe somewhere in the second quarter at 17-7 Pittsburgh. I mean, just look. I mean, you can just see. I mean, how odd it is. I mean, because right, the 49ers now have the golden helmet with their logo on the helmet back in, right? It's silver helmets. They had some red stripes on it. Yeah. It was different back then. A lot of back then. Also, obviously the Steelers didn't have a logo. Right now they just have it on the one side of the helmet. Well, back then they didn't have it on either side. Also, back then Steelers had yellow helmets. There we go. All right, there you go. John Henry Johnson. I'm going to say right here. He played one. I mean, look. I mean, just a 1-bar face mask right here. This one's got the white plastic. That's kind of like the helmet that I had when I was a kid. I'd buy that. My parents would buy me a helmet like at Sears or something like that. Might have the Giants logo on it, but that was the face mask we had. It was just, you can imagine how many concussions the guys got back then. Here we go. It's unbelievable. Look at this freaking picture. My goodness. I'm going to say this might be against the Giants. This could be Rosie Greer right here. A 1960 season recap. This could be Rosie Greer. This could be the Giants right here. But look, they didn't have the Steeler logo on the side. They had the numbers. I mean, man, look at that. Unbelievable. Here we go. One more shot here. Nice little postcard. Here's you're going to pop up. There's a beautiful picture of it. So very, very nice, ballpark. But once again, they don't all last forever. So got a little bit of pregame action here. So let's start off with the Pittsburgh Sun-Telegraph, September 26, 1959, of the Pittsburgh Sun-Telegraph. So, everybody starts season 0-0. There's only a 12-game season, so everybody's got high hopes, especially the Browns, and after the Steelers win this game, hey, right, as I said, the Steelers, because the Steelers in 58, the final 7 games of the season, they didn't lose a game. I can't remember if they won. Let's take a look here. I'll cheat. I'll take a look. I can't remember if they tied a game in there or if they won their final 7. They tied. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So their final 7 games, the Steelers, 7 of the 58 season, they were 6-0-1. They didn't lose a game. So you can almost say that in the last 7 games of the 58 season, the Steelers might have been the best team in football. But they stumbled out of the gates too. So after the Steelers win this game, a lot of the fans are saying, "Oh, you're telling me we got a chance, huh?" I mean, the final 7 games, and they win this game. They're like, "Oh my goodness!" Right? But not meant to be. All right. So let's the Pittsburgh Sun Telegraph. Okay, here we go. Pittsburgh Sun Telegraph. All right, here we go. Browns favorite over the Steelers. Let me this here. And it's odd because this game was played on a Saturday. Now, we're not playing, you play in the NFL nowadays, you play Saturday football games, but that's not till December. That's not until basically college football is over with. And, they're just waiting for the bowl games to start. No, I mean, they played some Saturday games early. So they were going, whatever you want to call it, head to head against the college football games. As you can see here, the Panthers played USC, for crying out loud. USC won 23-0. But 6 weeks ago, the Steelers pointed for a Cleveland Browns, and the finger worked. Tonight, again, they will be trying to point against the same Browns, but the odds say the finger is not as sturdy now as it was back on August 11th. In other words, it was a robust Steeler team that bopped the Browns 34-20 in the opening exhibition game of the season at Forbes Field. And tonight's Steeler outfit is not so healthy as it opens the National Football Campaign at 8 p.m. at Forbes Field. While the Steelers are hurting, the Browns are physically sound, which has forced the books to up the point spread from the opening line of 3 to 3.5. Coach Buddy Parker was able to field his first teams intact. The game would be a pick affair. But without Jack McLaren at end, a still weak Jimmy Orr playing his first game since the Bear game in Houston, and the possibility that defensive ace Jack Butler won't play because of a bad ankle, the Browns are a natural choice. In place of McLaren, Parker will use Darrell Pete Brewster, who was a member of the Browns the last 7 years, and helping out Orr in case his knee doesn't hold up will be a brand new pass catcher, Buddy Dial, the All-American from Rice. Now, the Giants drafted Buddy Dial. They let him go. And he went on to have a very successful career. The Giants also had some guy by the name of Don Maynard. They let him go. And he went on to have a Hall of Fame career with Joe Namath in the New York Jets. The Giants kept two guys who I can't remember what their names are. I'm a Giant fan. I mean, they let go Buddy Dial, who they drafted that in the second round, and Don Maynard. They had those two guys, and they let them both go. And they kept two guys who basically did absolutely freaking nothing, not only for the Giants, but in their NFL careers. Can't get much stupider than that. So the Giants' stupidity is the Steelers were the beneficiary of some huge stupidity by the part of the Giants. Although Buddy Dial didn't have exactly a fantastic, and neither did Don Maynard, preseason for the Giants. I mean, obviously, she one of the big parts, but they let two good guys go. Dial, who joined the club the other day after being released by the Giants, is a speedster who made some phenomenal grabs for the Rice Owls last season. He was put on the roster today, and Tom Miner, the field goal kicker who tied for the NFL lead with 14 last year, was dropped. That was the league leader in 14. I mean, nowadays, the field goal kickers are kicking 20-something, although they are playing more games out there. Incidentally, Paige Coffin, the co-holder of the lead with Miner, was cut by the Rams on Thursday. Not only will Parker have a rough job manipulating his passing offense, what with the new players, but he also will have to come up with a real rough defense to hold the Browns' running aces, fullback Jimmy Brown and halfback Bobby Mitchell. Although Coach Paul Brown used Jimmy Brown as little as possible in the 6 exhibition games, the All-Pro line bender, nonetheless scored 8 of the club's 15 touchdowns. He made 3 of them on runs of 70 yards or better. As I was going through their exhibitions, it was amazing. It was, and he didn't, they didn't hand him the ball a ton of times, but it was amazing how many times Jim Brown would get like a 70-yard run. It was just unbelievable. Mitchell, who was in the Army when the Steelers upended the Browns earlier, is back scampering like a gent trying to avoid a host of processed servers. Okay. There's a chance for the Steelers, slim as it is. All they have to do is contain Brown and Mitchell for even with an improvised end condition. They will have one big advantage. That edge will be in passer as Bobby Lane, one of the greatest ever in the game, will be throwing for the Steelers. Bobby has the poise that Milt Plum, the Browns heaver, lacks. Parker has a solution to the game. If it works, he says, it's tough to keep the Browns from scoring, but you can win by outscoring them. By that, I mean they won't make many mistakes that will help you. You have to do it yourself. Steelers versus the Browns. Now, of course, that as you'll notice right here, the Steelers had 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks on it, right? Then you look here, they had Milt Plum and Jim Nanowski. I mean, those was the Browns quarterbacks, but a young Len Dawson and, of course, a veteran Bobby Lane, 2 fantastic quarterbacks. And there's the 2 teams. All right, so what do we got now here? Then we're going to go to the Pittsburgh Press, the September 26, 1959 edition of the Pittsburgh Press. What's that got to say here? All right, there we go. Let me refresh here. Steelers open NFL season a week early. And I'll explain why. They're not ready for the Browns, Parker says. The Steelers open the National Football League campaign against the Browns at Forbes Field tonight, but Coach Buddy Parker feels the season is starting a week too early. We're going to be all right, said Parker, praising his team, but we're not quite ready yet. So that's what he means, a week early. They're not quite ready. The pessimism was voiced over the condition of the Steelers' ends, both on offense and defense. With 4 of them injured to varying degrees, Parker feels that the Browns may be a little too tough in tonight's inaugural. The Steel coach has managed to salvage something of his casualties, however. Both Jimmy Orr and Gern Nagler, 2 of the less seriously afflicted, will be ready for action, although neither is able to move at unimpeded speed. Or, it appears, will start the game. Meanwhile, Parker made a shocking switch yesterday when he replaced Tom Miner, the league's top field goal kicker last season, with another end, Buddy Dial of Rice. I wound up a fantastic move. The switch means that the kicking duties will fall to quarterback Bobby Lane, and he was their field goal kicker. Norm Van Brocklin was like the punter for the Eagles. Well, Bobby Lane was the field goal extra point kicker. Right? The quarterback, could you imagine Pat Mahomes being the field goal kicker for the – yeah, that's not happening nowadays. Let's see. So the kicking duties goes to Bobby Lane, which it did for the season. It says here, or defensive halfback Bob Luna, a San Francisco castoff. So anytime I was reading articles, Bobby Lane as Bob Luna was the long field goal kicker. Maybe he, if anything, really far. But for the most part, Bobby Lane, the Hall of Fame quarterback, was the kicker for the Steelers throughout the season. Didn't do too bad of a job either. Miner, who joined the Steelers last year, set a new club scoring record with 73 points. Included in his feats was the foot were 14 field goals in 28 tries, which back then 50% field goal success wasn't too bad. Dial, who will see token action, if any, at all against the Browns, comes to the Steelers with an All-American reputation and a release by the New York Giants. Stupid. Drafted second by the Giants in the second round. He was dropped by the Eastern Division champs this week. I mean, part because him and Maynard didn't have exactly a banner preseason. Steelers are well aware of the task confronting them tonight. The visitors from Ohio, with boastfulness, point to Jimmy Brown at halfback Bobby Mitchell. Their two-pronged scoring punch as the most dangerous backfield in the league, and they are not far wrong. The pair, the former hitting like a tank and the latter flicking like a snake, shredded enemy lines during the preseason campaign. These two masked their damaging stabs behind a fast mobile line that features one of the offensive stars of the game, guard Jimmy Ray Smith. Smith, a 230-pound bulldozer, blasts tremendous holes in the line, yawning gapes that practically invite the back to run. Okay. The game, which is expected to lure a crowd of about 30,000 plus, starts at 8:05. Now, quite often back then, and there was a lot of games did not sell out like they do today. Now we'll go to the Cleveland Press, the September 26, 1959 edition of the Cleveland Press. You know, if the game was a big, meaningful game and all that and everything, yeah, you have a chance of selling out. But a lot of games did not sell out back then. Steelers Giants rate as Browns' top rivals. There's the Cleveland Press newspaper here. Paul Brown tonight lights the fuse to one of pro football's most explosive attacks, and the Browns will be off and running, passing too, in their 10th National Football League season. Because remember, they came into the league in 1950. The National Football League in 1950. So this is their 10th NFL season, 1959. First obstacle on the 12-game schedule is the Pittsburgh Steelers at Forbes Field with kickoff at 8:05 p.m. The Browns have the horses to go all the way to their 8th division title. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. They won in 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, and 57. So, I mean, they were dominant. A lot of that also had to do with the fact that they had Otto Graham as their quarterback. Let's see here. New York and Pittsburgh again rate as their chief rivals. Chicago Cardinals have youth and speed in the backfield and improved lines and should do better than last year's 5th place finish. Well, no, not necessarily. Philadelphia is going with only 21 veterans and probably will need time to develop. No, not really. While Washington appears to be the weakling of the division. Well, that's true. Actually, Washington and the Cardinals wind up being the weaklings in the division. The other 4 teams, the Eagles, the Browns, the Giants, and the Steelers, all wind up with winning records. In the Western section, a repeat of last year's 3-way fight among Baltimore, Chicago, and the Rams is the prospect. Well, actually, it would wind up being Baltimore, the Bears, the 49ers, and the Packers. Because all 4 of those teams had winning records. So it was kind of odd because there was 12 teams in the league. 8 of the teams had winning records. So that means, 8 had winning, but that means the other 4 all had horrible records. Although the Rams' rather porous defense puts them at a disadvantage, San Francisco, Detroit, and Green Bay will fight for 4th place. And once again, here's the teams. Once again, there was only 36 players on the team. Only 36, unlike today where they dress, I believe, 46 for a game. 53-man roster, but you only dress 46. Well, back then, that's why you have Bobby Lane kicking field goals for you. You don't have specialists like the way they do in today's NFL. Pittsburgh was undefeated in its last 7 games last year and is rated a genuine threat on that basis. Only 3 rookies made the roster this year. The Steelers have only ordinary running, but Bobby Lane's passing to Rookie of the Year Jimmy Orr, Ray Matthews, Jack McLaren, who is now hurt, Pete Brewster, and Gern Nagler, along with a solid defense, makes them a potentially dangerous. And it does. I mean, it didn't mean that they won every game or nothing like that, but, it was true. Like, any given Sunday? Well, any given Sunday, the Steelers can beat you, without question. The Giants, too, have made few changes and hope that their rugged defensive unit can compensate for a continued lack of backfield speed. Now, the Giants had some good running backs, but backfield speed that they did not have. I mean, Alex Webster and Frank Gifford. Alex Webster was not light of foot. Frank Gifford, but he was not Jimmy Brown. He was not Bobby Mitchell. Brown tabs his rushing combination of Jim Brown at fullback and Bobby Mitchell at halfback, the fastest pair in captivity. Hard to argue with that. What makes them doubly dangerous are the added ingredients of Brown's tremendous driving power and Mitchell's will-o'-the-wisp elusiveness. Yeah. Cleveland's passing should be more of a threat this year, chiefly because of quarterback Mill Plum in something poise and the addition of seasoned and Billy Houghton, who they got from the Green Bay Packers. With Houghton flanking wide right, halfback Ray Renfro wide left, and Preston Carpenter maneuvering from his tight end position, the Browns have the means of loosening up Pittsburgh's veteran defensive unit. All right, now what else we got here? The Plain Dealer, another Ohio paper. So we'll go to September 26, 1959 edition of the Plain Dealer. One second, what do they got to say? All right. Let me refresh it before it screws up on me here. Youthful Browns, 3-point favorites. Average age is only 26 as the Clevelanders opened regular season at Pittsburgh. 26 years old. Wow. My goodness. Paul Brown enters the 1959 football season with one of his youngest teams in many years. That was always, one of the problems that they had was after Otto Graham retired, of finding the quarterback. They had Mill Plum, they had Frank Ryan, they had some nice quarterbacks, but Mill Plum and Frank Ryan were not the reasons that they won championships. Otto Graham was maybe not the reason, but he was certainly up there as far as one of the reasons that the Browns went to all the championship games from 1950 to 55. Average age of the Browns, who opened against the Pittsburgh Steelers tonight at Forbes Field, is 26. To find another Cleveland squad that young, one would have to go back to the days of the old American Football Conference. This is the biggest turnover I can remember, said Brown yesterday after a final workout at League Park. I'm sure 8 rookies never made the club before, and in addition, we have new men in Billy Houghton and Sid Youngelman. For many years, the Browns pretty much remained intact. They were winning championships and few men retired. The influx of new players began during the losing season of 1956. Yeah, it was amazing. They went to every championship game from 50 to 55. And Otto Graham retires in 1956. Paul Brown is his first losing season with the Browns. All 5 players who were with the college All-Stars still are with the Browns. Their guard John Wooten of Colorado and Rich Kreitling of Illinois and Dick Shafrath, Ohio State, tackle Francis O'Brien of Michigan State, and halfback Bob Tasick of Michigan. Pete Brewster, who retired from the Browns after last season and then changed his mind, is the Steelers' most recent addition. He will start and end in this league opener, which will be witnessed by 35,000. Kickoff is 8 p.m. Although the Browns lost a 34-20 decision to the Steelers in the exhibition season, they are 3-point favorites. Place-kicking specialist Tom Miner, 4th leading scorer in the National Football League last season with 73 points, was dropped yesterday by the Steelers. Coach Buddy Parker cut loose Miner to make room for N. Buddy Dial, formerly of Rice and the New York Giants. All right, so what happened during the game? All right, so we're going to go to the Plain Dealer, September 27, 1959 edition of the Plain Dealer. What happened? All right, here we go. There's 2 pages for this story here. Let me refresh the page here so it doesn't screw up on me. Browns lose 17-7. And Ohio edges Duke 14-13. Now Ohio State, meaning. But you see right here, this guy right here, Jim Tyrer, he wound up at number 77. He wound up with fame of with the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, he was also once, very, very sadly, he wound up having, I guess, CTE. Many offensive linemen, it's kind of like the same thing as with Webster, the center for the Steelers. Many hits to the head, and very, 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 very sadly, I can't remember what year it was, but he would take his life and his wife's life. He had, I think, 4 children or something like that. I think they were all at home at the time. He killed his wife, and then he took his own life. Very sad. But that's what football will do for you. It's very sad, sad, sad. All right. Steelers Lane tosses 2 touchdowns. The Browns found one Bobby Lane just too much to handle last night. The big Texan, one of the game's great clutch performers, that's all Bobby Lane did was win. That's all He passed, kicked, and ran with superb skill as the Pittsburgh Steelers topped the Paul Brown's club 17-7 in the National Football League opener. Lane passed for both Steeler touchdowns as the home club, one of the co-favorites in the Eastern Division, came from 7 points back in the second half. To add insult to injury, it was Pete Brewster, former Browns receiver, dealt to Buddy Parker about 2 weeks ago, who shook loose for points that put the victory on ice. Browns rallied to win at 54-55. The loss makes the title road more difficult, but certainly not impossible for the Browns. I mean, it's with a 12 game, it's amazing. I mean, you lose a couple games and you're like, wow, I think we might be out of the running, because there was only one team that went to the championship game, unlike today where they have, you can actually have a losing record and make it to the playoffs nowadays. Well, it wasn't like that back then. Right? You lose a couple games, it's like, yeah, we're out of it already. The Browns dropped opening games in 54-55 and fought back to win the league championship. Cleveland will be trying to start that comeback next Sunday afternoon against the Cardinals in Chicago. The Browns' lone touchdown came in the second quarter on a 1-yard sneak by Mel Plum. Lou Groza, who missed a third-period field goal try of 28 yards, added the extra point. Lane, whose extracurricular activities had him in hot water during the exhibition season, was strictly business, and the crowd of 33,844 loved it. Lane connects on a field goal. In addition to his touchdown passes to Brewster and Jimmy Orr, he booted a 25-yard field goal and kicked 2 extra points. His first touchdown pass found Orr, the end, who was supposed to be hobbling from a knee injury, on the Cleveland 5. Walter Michaels seemed to have the sophomore receiver pinned, only to see him shake loose and jog into the end zone. That 19-yard pass came midway through the third quarter and put the Steelers ahead 10-7. Lane's 25-yard field goal 5 minutes earlier had put Pittsburgh on the board after a scoreless first half. The box score on the veteran signal caller playing his 12th year with the pros showed 49 yards gained running on 5 carries. He had on 13 of 20 passes for 209 yards and, of course, 2 touchdowns. All right, so let's go to the next page of the Plain Dealer here. The September 27th, 1959 edition of the Plain Dealer. Let's finish this story up here. But he only completed 13 passes, but they were for over 200 yards. Let me refresh this here, and let's see how did Notre Dame do? Oh, there it is. Oops, there it is. Oops, there it is. How did Notre Dame do? How did my Fighting Irish do? They won. They beat North Carolina 28-8. All right, cool. All right, Browns are toppled at Pittsburgh 17-7. Bobby had 2 interceptions, one by Kenny Cones and another by Junior Wren. The Browns moved 53 yards for a score after the Cones theft for their lone touchdown. Despite those 2 grabs, Lane came back better than ever in the second half, with Orr as his favorite target. Now, Orr, I think, was like the rookie of the year in 1958. Jimmy, whose remarkable recovery didn't surprise the Browns, pulled down 6 of Lane's aerials for 89 yards. Brewster, who retired from the Browns after last season and then changed his mind when Parker offered him a job, took 3 passes for 72 yards. On the fourth quarter touchdown toss, he got behind the Cleveland secondary and into the end zone. He was in the territory patrolled by Jim Schaffner and Junior Rem. Plum, at the Cleveland helm for the entire game, completed 13 of 23 passes for 146 yards. He had 1 intercepted, and that came in the fourth quarter with the decision no longer in doubt. Jim Brown gains 81 and 19 carries, so over the 4 yards a carry. Jim Brown was a Cleveland workhorse with 19 carries for 81 yards. The Steelers Lion Gang did an excellent job of halting him. You got that freaking right. After the game, gave his defense full credit for the upset. The Browns answered the kickoff as 3-point favorites. Mike McCormack saw no action for Cleveland, and Warren Law also was out. Both were resting injured knees, but undoubtedly will go against the Cardinals. And there are the starters. Here's the now you see the Browns scored a touchdown. Where's my pointer at? There we are, right here. Hey, this man. All right, and then the Steelers scored 7, then the 10 there in the third, and then they scored 7 in the fourth quarter. All right, where are we at here? Moving on up. Ray Renfro, who suffered a hip injury in the final exhibition victory over the Bears, was limping and certainly not as effective as usual. A bright spot was the receiving of Billy Houghton, who took 4 passes for 57 yards. It was his best showing since joining the team. Carpenter grabs 4 for 47. Preston Carpenter also grabbed 4 for 47 yards, and Jim Brown took 2 for 34. The Cleveland defense, which went into the game as a question mark, did a good enough job to win many ball games. He gave up only 121 yards rushing. The Browns finished behind in total yards, 323 to 274. Neither offense clicked in the first quarter, and the Browns didn't even get across midfield. Then in the second period, Cones intercepted that lane pass and returned 27 yards to start Cleveland goalward. Browns traveled the distance in 10 plays, with Brown working on the Steelers' left tackle and end. A 12-yard pass from Plum to Carpenter to the Steeler 20 was the only aerial. Plum then sneaked for the score. Bernie Parrish, making his first regular season appearance, batted down a lane pass to kill off a Steeler threat. That ended the Browns scoring, and the Cleveland team showed little punch the second half. Pittsburgh had gone ahead 10-7 as the game entered the last quarter. Then came the final Cleveland bid. The Browns moved from their 19 to the Steeler 20. There in a 4th down and 3 situation, Paul Brown called for the field goal. Cones, the holder, put the ball down on the 28. Rose's kick spiraled off to the left, and the Browns were finished. The Steelers marched right back. I guess that should be the Steelers marched right back to Brewster's touchdown and made it certain that it will be an uphill fight in the East for the Browns. All right, let's see. What do we got now there? Next, we got the Pittsburgh Sun-Telegraph. Excuse me. September 27, 1959 edition of the Pittsburgh Sun-Telegraph. What's that got to say? All right, let me refresh the page here. All right, Steelers bop Brown 17-7. They bopped them. Here we are. Lane, Boots, field goal, passes for 2 touchdowns. There have been many a good football game played in Forbes Field, but few equaled the Steelers' 17-7 victory last night over the Cleveland Browns in the opening skirmish of the National Football League for the late heavy drama. Quarterback Bobby Lane, as during the late splash of last season, was the leading actor. The demanding field leader, after the club was down 7-0 at the half, put on a show that had the crowd of 33,844 cheering his every move as he drove the Steelers to a touchdown and a field goal in the third period to take a 10-7 lead and another TD in the last quarter to ice the upset victory. Bobby threw for both touchdowns, boosted the 3-pointer, and added 2 extra points. A good break resulted for the Steelers when Jimmy Orr suddenly shook his knee injury and started the game. He was Lane's primary target on the first touchdown, catching a 19-yarder, which moved the Steelers out front. This TD came about 4 minutes after Lane put the Steelers' first score on the board with a 25-yard field goal. About midway in the fourth session, Lane completed the job with a perfectly aimed heave to Pete Brewster, who was with the Browns for 7 years before retiring after last season. In all, Lane completed 13 out of 20 passes, like 2 out of every 3, for 209 yards and added 49 yards running the ball. Orr was top receiver with 89 yards and 6 receptions. Brewster caught 3 for 72, and Ray Matthews picked up 44 yards with 2 catches. The Steeler defense also came in for a few curtain calls. It kept the Browns' 1-2 punch of fullback Jimmy Brown and fleet Bobby Mitchell from scoring, although Brown put the Ohioans in position for their only TD. Brown carried for 81 yards and did almost all of the work in the drive, which wound up with quarterback Milt Plum flying over center for a second period score. After the game, Coach Buddy Parker was full of praise for everybody on his club, but called his defense just great. Their first venture carried from their 34 to the 44, with a Lane to Orr pass eating up 14 of those yards. Later, with Tracy running and a pass from Lane to Orr, the Steelers went to the 43. However, all went blank when Low Ren intercepted Lane's pass on his own 29 on the first play of the second quarter. Another Steeler chance went slithering in the early part of the period on another interception. This one was grabbed off by Warren Lahr. It was intended for Matthews, who tipped the ball in the air. Wren made the theft on the Browns' 26 and carried it back 21 yards. From that point, Brown opened a personal drive, which resulted in a touchdown for the Browns with 3 minutes left in the period. The All-Pro fullback carried the ball 7 times in the 10-play assault, which wound up on the 1. Plum dove over center for the score. Only a 13-yard pass to Carpenter and a 6-yard dash by Mitchell kept the movement from being strictly a Brown production. They got Gorza. How about Groza? How about Lou Groza? Not Gorza. Added the extra point, and the Browns led at half 7-0. After 8 minutes of play in the third period, the Steelers made a run from their 21 down to the Browns' 14, but had to settle for a 25-yard field goal by Bobby Lane. By Lane to end. Darrell Brewster also saw Lane hit Matthews with a 19-yarder. Lane helped with his own kick, put on a brilliant display of passing minutes later to shoot the Steelers into a 10-7 lead with 2 minutes left in the quarter. After Derby, Fair caught a punt on his own 47. Lane ran to the Browns' 36, threw to Orr to the 20, and passed again to Orr down the left side. Orr caught the pass on the 5, fell, got up, and ran into the end zone. Lane added the extra point. Then the Browns came roaring back from their own 20 to the Steelers' 22 on a drive that stretched into the fourth quarter, but the Steelers held there. Groza, usually a sure thing from anything up to 40 yards, blew a 29-yard field goal try. It was wide to the left. Then the drama unfolded quickly. After that, a fired-up Steeler team went to work and moved from the 20 for a TD in 9 plays. Lane passes round receptive receivers, and Brewster and Orr, and a run by Lane shoved the home club down to the Browns' 23. Next, Lane wound up and flipped an arching pass into the arms of Brewster in the left corner of the end zone. Bobby converted, and the Steelers were ahead 17-7 with 7 minutes left in the game. Defensive halfback Bobby Luna, taking Jack Butler's spot, spoiled the Browns' bid for a TD with 32 seconds left when he intercepted a plum pass on the Steeler 15 and raced back to the 43. Tracy managed to get off a 3-yard gain as the game ended. And once again, Now, possibly because the game ended late, they didn't have all the stats. But they have, obviously who scored and who started and everything like that. But you figure the game started at 8 o'clock or whatever it wasn't over until after 10. So maybe they didn't have a chance to get all the stats in there before the papers started going out. All right, and we got the Pittsburgh Press, September 27th, 1959 issue of the Pittsburgh Press. What do they got to say here? All right, where are we at? Okay, here we go. Steelers bop Browns. There you go. Bopping them again. There we go. Touchdown for the Steelers came on this play as Jimmy Orr managed to catch a Bobby Lane pass and slip into the end zone in last night's game with Cleveland. At the left is Browns low. Wren Steelers won 17-7. I'm not sure. I don't know how he scored a touchdown. Let's play the ball. I have no idea. I don't know. He caught this pass, came on this play, a touchdown was. So somehow he caught this ball. No idea. And got into the end zone. Lane passes, kicks, pace, Pittsburgh win before 33,844. Fabulous Bobby Lane. Bobby Lane is in mine. If you're a Beatle fan. The Steelers' 32-year-old quarterback ran as friskily as a college sophomore and threaded the needle with his passes in the second half last night as the Steelers defeated the Cleveland Browns 17-7 at Forbes Field in the National Football League opener. Oh, here we go. We got some stats here. Let's see. Total first downs. The Browns had more, 20-18. Steelers 121 yards rushing, 202 passing, 323 total. It was Bobby Lane's passing. Oh yeah. And also, they're not a lot, not all the time, but a lot. I mean, the penalty yards were very minimal back then. Well, 3 penalties called against them at 24 yards against the Browns, 4 for 38. I mean, today, in some of the games nowadays, you can't even watch the games. It's like the referee show. You know what I mean? It's like every other play there's a freaking penalty. It's you can't even watch some of these games nowadays. It's unbelievable. The game during which Coach Buddy Parker's battered and bleeding Chargers thoroughly shocked a tremendous crowd of 33,844 turned into a rout in the third period after the Browns scoring first on a tremendous drive by fullback Jimmy Brown went to the dressing room with a 7-0 lead. It was in the third period that the Steelers stormed ahead 10-7 on a 26-yard field goal by Bobby Lane, an 18-yard Lane touchdown pass to Jimmy Orr, I guess, which must be this picture right here, because that's the only one that Jimmy Orr scored. I still don't know how he caught this pass, but the injured end who resumed workouts only 5 days ago after being sidelined for almost a month. It was Lane again in the fourth quarter, hitting Darrell Brewster, a former Cleveland end, with a 21-yard scoring toss to climax a 30-minute segment of the game, which saw the former Detroit star complete 8 of 9 passes for 143 yards. The win, Parker's second in a row over Cleveland coach Paul Brown, must have been particularly galling to the visitors from Ohio. At the end of the game, he streaked straight for the dressing room, neglecting even a glance at the, there's Bobby Lane, Steeler wrench, maybe bench, for the traditional congratulations. Wow. And galling it could have been. Cleveland's famed running attack outgained the supposedly weak Steelers by only 18 yards, 139-121. And the Browns had the advantage of an additional unrehearsed player to boot. As the game neared its end, a fan, obviously a Clevelander, since he picked on the Steelers, pushed out onto the field and laid a resounding tackle on linebacker John Rieger. A pair of policemen followed him and pulled him protestingly off the field. For a while, in the second period, it appeared that the Steelers were in for a rough evening. Getting the ball at midfield on an interception by Ken Cones, quarterback Milt Plum called on Brown, to power the attack, and the 230-pound fullback did exactly that. Carrying the ball on 8 of 10 plays, Brown shoved and heaved at the Steeler line, bending it at will as he took the Browns down to the Pittsburgh 3. Here, Plum called on Brown again. He charged off tackle, was hurled viciously to the ground, and on the next play, Plum took the ball over himself. Although nobody knew it at the time, that was the end of the Browns' heroics during the... All right, let's go one more page here. The Pittsburgh Press, the Sunday, September 27th, 1959 edition of the Pittsburgh Press. Let me refresh the page here so it doesn't get screwed up. Sure. All right, so it ended. Where did it end there? Although nobody knew it at the time, that was the end of Brown's heroics. During the evening, he gained 81 yards and 19 carries, the longest jaunt of the night being a 9-yard run. That's phenomenal for the Steelers. Bobby Mitchell didn't do much more. In 9 carries, the fleet back picked up 46 yards. The other top gainers were Tom Tracy, who had 51 yards and 17 carries, and Lane, who had 49 yards and 5. All predetermined plays off the option. A big man for the Steelers was Orr, who caught 6 key passes despite being hindered by a not fully recovered knee. It was after the intermission that the Steelers started to sparkle, scoring the first 2 times they got the ball. A 26-yard field goal by Lane narrowed the count to 7-3, and when Low Ren's punt on the next series of downs reached only the Steelers 47, the Steelers were off and running. Lane charged for 11 yards and then nailed Orr for an 18-yard pass to the Browns 20. After Tracy slashed at the line for another yard, Lane hit Orr with a diagonal pass on the 5, and Orr, slipping, crawled back to his feet and slithered into the end zone. When Lane's extra point sailed over the crossbar, the Steelers led 10-7. Here we go. Here's some stats right here. We'll check them out in a minute. It was a drive from their own 20 that netted the Steelers their next touchdown, and again it was Lane hitting Brewster, Orr, and running 14 yards himself on a rollout who did the damage. The score came when Lane lofted a high pass that Brewster all alone took in the end zone. Ironically, the final touchdown drive resulted from a play that brought their hearts to the throats of Steeler fans. It came after Lou Groza, called upon to not the count from the Steeler 29, booted the ball wide of the goalpost. And there's the starters, right? And there's the scoring. And here we go. I don't know. This is wrong here. Oh, they have Bobby Lane here twice. That's why. There's no way that one guy has 59, one has 49, and one has 51, and one is that's too many yards. So they got Bobby Lane here twice. That's why. But you see here, I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, Brown averaged 4 yards a carry. Mitchell, well, this is wrong too. That wasn't 76 yards, was it? That's 76 yards. He said he had less than that, but. I mean, you just wondering. They picked up all these yards and they couldn't. I don't know. It is what it is. Passing, Lane was 13 out of. So this is wrong. I thought it was 13 out of 20. So I don't know. I mean, some of this stuff is, a lot of typo errors here. But here's the receivers right here. But Bobby Lane, he was a winner, of course. Obviously in this game here, he obviously needed some help from his defense, and it certainly got that. I mean, the Browns, although this season scored single digits in 3 different games, and of course they lost all 3 of those games. So this obviously would be one of them. I mean, score 17 points. Okay, that's nice. But the defense held the Cleveland Browns, a rather healthy Cleveland Browns, only 7 points. Rather remarkable. But this was like a little mirage, because although the Steelers started off 1-0 and the Browns started off 0-1, the Steelers, after like halfway through the season, would already be out of contention for the Eastern Division title, losing 4 games. The Browns started off 0-1, but that was like a little bit of a mirage too, because after 8 games, they were 6-2. Now, where the Steelers, as I said before, where they fell out of contention early on in the season because they lost so many games, the Browns fell out of contention toward the end of the season when they wound up losing 3 out of their final 4 games. But even so, the Pittsburgh Steelers would wind up with a third place finish, but a record of 6-5-1, and the Cleveland Browns would finish tied at second place with the miraculous Philadelphia Eagles, both being at 7-5, and the Giants would win the division with a record of 10-2. Now, they would have the fewest wins in the league, only 2 losses, but that didn't help them when it came time to the championship game. As the Baltimore Colts ran roughshod over them, 31-16. So that's the way it was on this date. Saturday Night Football, September 26th, 1959, as the Cleveland Browns went into Forbes Field to take on the Pittsburgh Steelers in pro football, first 50 years. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.